Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. We're continuing our On Wander Lane Wall Hanging Club tutorial series. This has been so popular with customers. I love that the project's the same size each month. So when you find that special place in your home, you get your hanger. We have a beautiful Ackfeld hanger here. You can just look forward to making a new project to display each month. And of course, Nancy Halverson, who is the designer not only behind these wall hangings, but all of the fabric as well. Her designs are just so darling, and she accentuates them with a little bit of hand embroidery, and she loves buttons. There's a lot of buttons in this one. I think they really make the project extra special. So if you are picking up this kit, be sure to pick up those buttons as well. A little bit of embroidery here in black and dark green. Maybe you've got something at home. If not, we'll make sure we have those colors available for you on the website if you need to pick them up. And Nancy has been so gracious. We love partnering with her. She's one of our favorite designers. She allows us to prefuse and laser cut the applique. Now be sure to grab the pattern. It's going to have all of the instructions of how to put this together, as well as so many other projects inside her book. It's an incredible value, and you're going to need that to put the project together. Of course, we have put an extra thing in here for you because Nancy, when she wrote her pattern, she just said, for a green, cut this fabrics to certain sizes. For a red, do this. We know that in your kit, you have the specific fabrics, the exact fabrics Nancy's used. So the supplemental insert here is to just identify those specific fabrics. The cuts are the same thing that's inside her pattern so that you can just grab your fabric, confirm you have the right fabric, and then you're cutting all of that to her requirements. And then you'll be referring to her pattern for assembly instructions. My job today is to try to unpack that and give you some tips and techniques for precise piecing that's going to help the blocks come out to be the exact size. So when you get ready to put everything together, things are just clicking together as a puzzle. If you're like me and you're busy throughout the day, you get to quilt kind of sporadically, and the chance of doing this in one sitting is about 0. It's nice to have our project bags. It's a great way to store the blocks as you're working through them in a safe location. This is the June Taylor project bags. I'd put the block in there, maybe even some blocks that are in progress, and the patterns. I have admitted that I have spilled a few drinks in my sewing room, damaged some fabric, definitely damaged things. We're working hard on these blocks. Let's protect those inside those beautiful bags. And they're great beyond this series, right? This works for any block of the month. So that's a set of 2. 3 blocks to cover today. We have our bee, which is just so adorable, a strawberry block, and a flower block. So we're just going to jump into it. Lots of pieces. I'll be talking you through most of that, maybe doing a touch of sewing here and there, but for the most part, if I can talk you through it, we'll get through this a little bit quicker. And if I'm going to be sewing on a straight line, there's no mystery there, right? You get the concept. So this is the block that we're going for here. And notice there's some directional fabric. So right away, I want to call your attention to that. Tammy prepared all of my video prep for me today. She's incredible. And Tammy does not sleep at night if her fabrics that are directional are not moving in the same direction. So in order to keep Tammy sane, me sane, and maybe you too, you might want all those moving in the same direction. But if you're like, I don't care, then the steps that I'm going to say about being mindful about directional fabric doesn't apply to you. So I just want to call your attention that anytime you're seeing a directional fabric, here, maybe there's a directional fabric in this block, that's just your alert to be, if you care about that directional fabric, just be a little bit more careful. So this is the first thing that we'll do is just make these corners. And you can see this is very easy to do. We've done this in some of the other tutorials. Not uncommon to put a square in those corners, draw on a straight line. Any creative grid ruler will work. Let me just grab this one here. And we're doing the same here. You sew directly on the line. And this is where we want to right away say, okay, If we want all of our flowers, all of our greenery, I would say, kind of a vine, it's not really greenery, but it's a vine. If you want that flowing up, we can't just willy-nilly put this in the corner. We need to check back to that directional. So notice how I put this on here flowing this direction, but here's a funny thing that happens. If I did that, which seems correct, watch what's going to happen. When I flip this, notice that greenery, that vine is going sideways. Oh, not like that. Okay, let's iron that away. So that's right away something that I've been duped on many times. I'm finally wising up to that. That now, in fact, we need to draw the line with our foliage, our greenery, running left to right. Now, when I sew that, you can see that's going up and down. Not only is this directional, but there is a specific direction. So notice that this is going up, the leaves are going up, and if I turned it around, it seems correct, but notice the leaves are now trailing down. So it's even more specific. So the best thing to do is say, okay, I want this like this. What do I have to do? Is it like this? Yes. I just fold it over. I'm like, I can't visualize that any other way. If that's you, put it in the corner, pin, and we sew directly on the line. Once we have that, we're going to press to the outside. No surprise there. I always press to the outside before I trim, just in case I'm not happy. Why would I not be happy? If that didn't get all the way to the corner, or if it's pushing past this corner, I would seam rip and do again. Maybe something shifted on my way to the sewing machine. Maybe I didn't pin, whatever that might be. Lift those, turn the flaps back, and trim. So now we have our two sections, and we've done the other one ahead of time. So we have two of those. All right, let me put that aside for now. Let's just start cleaning up as we go. That part, easy peasy. Again, mindful of directional fabric here. So let's just look at what we have. All kinds of pieces. Notice how I've got labels on these. Very helpful. Nancy does a great job in her book of saying, here's the cut, that's the letter of the cut. You can see that it is easy to get those three fabrics mixed up. They all have a specific position that they need to go in. Just label that and make your life a lot easier. And I find it's easier to cut and label versus I cut and then I think I'm going to label. That's where the mix-up can happen. They certainly have happened that way for me, where I mislabeled a fabric and the block went together not correct, and out comes the seam ripper. So for this part here, starting off with our fabric G, right side together, sew our 1/4 inch. We have our fabric and we're pressing toward the blue. That's this portion of our block so far. We simply add this to the other side, and now we have our upper portion here of the upper right quadrant of that block. Now on this side, we have the same idea right here. We have our gray, sewing that together, pressing toward the blue, and then we just have this in the corner. Right side together, press. Now we have this quadrant to sew together. So I'm going to flip this over so you can see that. I want you to see that pressing. That's our upper right portion of our block. So let's just set that out here, what we've got so far. We're kind of rebuilding our block. Down here in this portion, I thought this was very clever. We start off with this unit right here. So we've just got a series of rectangles that we're sewing together, pressing the seams open. Once you have that, now we will use our 3.5 Creative Grid. Did a great job, the 3.5 inch. I lay this right on the seam. If you have a 3.5, it doesn't have to be Creative Grid. This is a great ruler because it makes it so easy. The point is that right now we need to go trim off the excess to create the bee body to now add the other blue fabrics to that. So we start off with this. I thought that was a very clever assembly technique that Nancy came up with. Very, very clever. So once we have this, just like that, once again, mindful of that directional fabric. Remember, if we want the foliage going up and down, we have to set it up left or right. Makes no sense to me, but it really does once you flip it back. And flip it back, right? Now, I normally press to the outside. However, one of Tammy's, I would say, gifts to quilting, she is very dialed into having interlocking seams, and she can see, and has helped me see as well, and helping you see as well, having interlocking seams is what makes so many of her points be just beautiful. Why am I bringing that up? Look at this right here. Remember how we press to the outside, press toward the blue. If I were to press to the blue here, let me do it. Let me show you. This is not what to do, and I'll show you why. In the past, I would have absolutely done this. I would have trimmed this away, which I can still do. That part you're definitely going to do. It's the pressing that is now different in my world. I'm a changed quilter, learning from people that have great techniques, better techniques than I had as a young quilter. So let's get back to this. Remember how I said in my early days, I've always pressed to the outside. Here's why we don't want to do it. When we get ready to sew the bottom portion together and the upper portion together, I want these points to come out perfectly. Look what happens when everything always is pressed to the outside. I have one layer here. I have this seam, press that, and this one. There are no interlocking seams. For this reason, instead of pressing to the outside, I'm going to press that seam to the inside. This is why you watch these videos. You're going to be able to share this technique with friends that might be struggling with their points coming together because everything is always pressed to the outside and there's a lot of lopsided bulk. That's what is creating that. It also makes it harder when you want to long arm quilt your quilt. You have these hills and valleys of 2 layers and 6 layers and 2 layers and 6 layers, and you can see that makes for a difficult time to quilt the project. But now that this seam is pressed in and this seam is pressed out, now look. Do you see now how that seam is going this direction, this seam is going this direction, and those points nest? That's absolute gold. I'm going to sew this with you. I want you to see that by just pressing, our chance of hitting that point has increased significantly because we have an interlocking seam and I can feel that lock. All right, I've also got my seam guide on my machine to help me stay true to that 1/4 inch. We want to distribute that bulk evenly. I can see that seam wants to lay over, but in this case, let's press that open. And let's take a look and see how we did from the front. See how that just came out perfectly? Why? Those seams aren't slipping off of each other. They lock in. That's the key. So create those opportunities for yourself because you're setting yourself up for success. Over here, we don't have that situation. You're just simply right side together, 1/4 inch seam allowance, press the seam open, join the 2 halves, and again, That's how we went ahead and pressed everything. Notice every single seam is open, and that just seemed to work really well with the bumblebee block. All right, I'll get cleaned up, and the next block we'll be working on will be our flower block. For our flower block, we have a fun opportunity to fussy cut our center. That's where that 3.5 creative grid comes in. I love finding my favorite house on the piece of fabric you have, laying that right on there, and just being able to cut around that. So fun. So this is a great ruler for this block as well to get the center cut, and you can put that aside for now. We can just focus on breaking the block down to see we have some rectangles that kind of have that, what we call kind of snowballing. Again, where you start off with a rectangle, some squares in the corner, draw the line, sew, and flip. We've done that ahead of time. And then here, really the same idea. We've done this one where we put a dark green in the corner, white in the corner. And here we opted to press to the outside on this one. So in order to have the interlocking seam right there, on this one, we will press actually all the way to the back. All the way to the back on that. For the same reason we spoke about, having those interlocking seams is lovely. Now, sometimes I press to the outside just to get it going, like this, and then I continue turning it over and press again. Let's do that. There we go. Press to the back side. And then we're going to trim. So let me let that sit there, good and hot. Let's trim the excess away. It's actually probably a little bit simpler to check it, trim it, press to the back. And let's repress that to the back. All right. Once we have that, those two halves that are here, let's look at that. Notice our seam is going here. This seam is going here. Why do we care? Right there. There's that lock right there. We sew. Once we've done that, we press that seam open. And I'm going to go ahead and do that just so we have our bottom row. And let's have a look. See how those points just come out. I never knew as an early quilter, and I didn't know for a long time even after that, that pressing would help my blocks come out, the points come out better. Little did I know that has been an absolute game changer. So I'm grateful to have learned from Tammy and so many other ladies I've learned from at quilt retreats. It's amazing the things that we learn. I think that's one of my favorite parts about going to quilt retreats. Okay, so we get the idea that the top row is done. The bottom row is really the same. You're just doing that twice. You're doing the top, this row twice, once for the top, once for the bottom. And then there's the middle. The sides, let's look at that. These start off with some squares. And surprise, right? We're going to just snowball that corner. We've been doing that. We're calling that snowball. And as we look at this, we can see once again, one's pressed in, one's pressed out to help us give us that interlocking seam. Let me just show you what that's going to look like so you can get a visual on that. There we go. So you can see that. So you can see when we put this together, that seam's going this direction, that seam's going that direction. All the points come out beautifully. And it looks like the white one is the one we pressed toward the green. So I'm going to check it, trim it, and then I'll press to the back. that's this portion here. And then of course this one, let's look at that. Let's look at our interlocking seams right there. Let's go sew that together. Press that seam. There's our beautiful points. We lay out our block. And easy peasy, right? Right side together. Sew from this side so you can keep an eye on that open seam. Make sure nothing rolls back. And then let me show you how we press that block. And you can see why we press toward the middle here. We have these seams. Naturally, this will want to go toward the block that has no seams. So that's not a big surprise. So that center together. And then we simply add our top and bottom and we press to the upper portion. And for the lower portion here, we just press toward the bottom. And that's all there is to making that flower block. Again, precise piecing definitely coming into play. 1/4 inch seam allowances, but that pressing in this instance, and it wouldn't have mattered if this unit was pressed to the middle and these were pressed to the outside. Pick your favorite. We just chose to do that like this, but the interlocking seam is what we're going for. Alternating those is how we get there. Okay, we're moving right along. I'll clean this up and then we'll move on to our strawberry block. So now we're ready with our strawberry block, and this was a lot of fun to put together. Some things you're like, we've already done a lot of this technique. Yes, we have. That's nice, right? You're like, we've already done that. Easy peasy. Red rectangle, squares, draw on the line, sew and flip, pressing to the outside on those. Such cute fabric. Who doesn't love a strawberry block? And we trim. We've been doing that, continuing to do that. I think that's one of the fun things about quilting. Once you learn the process of quilting, and if you're an experienced quilter, you already know this, you start to do and recognize, you're like, I've done this before. I've done this before. It's actually only on very rare occasion that you find something like, I've never seen that technique before to do, you know, who knows, flying geese, half square triangles, whatever that might be. So that's the bottom portion of our strawberry. Let's just focus on the sides, and then we'll talk about the pinwheel that's in the middle that really is so adorable. On our sides here, again, we're starting off with a rectangle, square with a drawn line, and we are going to sew in flip. And let me just show you the back of this block. All of this was pressed away except when we start involving parts of our pinwheel section and a little bit right there. So I wanted to give you a good look at that so you could decide if you like those pressing instructions as well and follow along if you do. Once we've done this, we simply add this upper portion right above it and sew that together. And we do the same thing here, right? It's just reflected. So let me just show you that. Same thing, right? It's the same thing you're doing with this above. But let me go ahead. I want to have the elements of the block to be able to put that together, at least talk you through that. So let me get that in the proper orientation. I will sew from this side so I can keep an eye on that seam. All right, that is now that half. Trim off some threads here. Let's talk about our pinwheel section. That's just so cute. Really love that part. So as we know, we need to make some small half square triangles. We've all done this before. I'm just going to start off with the white and the green fabrics same size square. You can either draw the line diagonally and sew a 1/4 inch on either side, or you can use the Creative Grid seam guide, however you want to do that. Draw on either side and sew on the lines. I think we had done that. Yes, we did. Yes, we did, right here. So you can see we've drawn on the line. And now we will cut that and press toward the green. Yes, we did press toward the green on all of those. And then later in final assembly, that's when we started pressing seams open. And that's how we've always made pinwheels. At this stage, we're pressing toward our darker fabric, unless there's a compelling reason to do otherwise, and there's not. That extra bulk that happens here with these, I just trimmed that away. And we'll do the same. So we have our upper portion. Press that again. We have our, so we have this part, and then for the bottom portion, same thing, red fabric with the green fabric, right side together, draw the line. So now you would have 2 half-square triangles. Then you lay them out. We've done that. Actually, we've sewed those together. So those were laid out. I'll just show you how we got there. Lay those out, right side together. We'll have some nice interlocking seams, our favorite. Let's sew that together. This is where we start pressing seams open to evenly distribute the bulk. So I will follow suit with that. Then trim that off here. With right sides together, you're just nesting one seam, kind of just stacking them, I should say, as such. Make sure you pin really well right in that middle. Okay. We have our nice points. Press open. These are tiny little things. This is slightly oversized, so I'll clean this off the table here. I'm going to grab a 2.5 inch Creative Grid, another mission specific ruler that if you've oversized a block and you want to square it up to 2.5, this is a great ruler to have in your sewing room. And so I just place this right on that diagonal. Now there's a lot of fabric going on because no matter what you do, no matter how you press, that's a lot of seams that confluence. So with this ruler, you just have to be really kind of almost anchored. I'm lining up along the diagonal as well as along my vertical and horizontal. That's the spot right there. Because of the amount of fabric, it's hard for this to not want to move away. Let me just move that out of the way as I rotate this. Might have to just stabilize that with each cut, but it's worth it. Making sure it doesn't move. Beautiful. Another reason to grab yourself a spinning mat. Now that we have that portion done, let's lay out our block again. Here, as you are stacking these together, you're stacking one seam exactly on top of that. Can you see that from above? Hopefully you can see that. That's why you will pin there first. Don't let that move. Then you can go pin in those corners. So your 1/4 inch seam, come back, you're doing the same thing over here. Stacking. Stacking those seams. So you're looking right above. Find your sweet spot, pinch, lock in your pin, 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 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's your top row. That's what that's going to look like. You can see why we pressed away from that patchwork block, that pinwheel. There is so many seams going on. We did not need to press more seams to the middle, so you can see that's why we that top row was to the outside, and then we simply joined the bottom. And because there's no seams going on again, and because again, we don't want to press toward that pinwheel unit, we press to the bottom, and that's all there is to making a strawberry block. So, hey, if you're a beginner and maybe you've been watching these videos and waiting, don't do that anymore. It's your time. Jump in, grab a kit, grab any notions you might need. These are, quilting is so much joy. Look at the news and you know what you're gonna figure out? We need a lot more downtime and a lot more joy, because that world is not a happy place right now, and when we sew, it's a very happy place. So if you haven't jumped at the fun, or maybe it's been a while since you've quilted, be sure to grab your kit, maybe the buttons, your patterns, whatever you need, and subscribe. There's so much coming your way. I look forward to seeing you next month as we continue our On Wander Lane wall hanging tutorials. I'll see you then.